It was a cold, gray dawn on the open plains, the kind of morning that whispers of trouble just beyond the horizon. The wind carried a chill that seemed to seep into your bones, and the only sound was the distant cry of a lone coyote. The ranch sat quiet, peaceful in the early light, but that serenity shattered in an instant. A small, trembling girl burst through the doorway of the barn, her eyes wide with terror. Her tiny hands clutched a crumpled piece of paper, an urgent message that had just been delivered. She ran across the dirt yard, tears streaming down her face, her voice trembling as she screamed, "They took my brother! They took my brother!" It was a call that would change everything. In that moment, in that fragile seconds of chaos, the girl's world turned upside down. She didn't understand all the details, only that men in dark hats and rough clothes had come in the dead of night, pulling her brother from their home without warning. The message was clear and terrifying. Her brother, a young boy no older than 10, had been taken by outlaws, bandits who saw her family's peace as nothing but a target. The sun had yet to fully rise, but her screams drew the attention of the ranch hands. Men who had seen their share of trouble, yet never quite like this. They looked at each other, their faces grim and resolute. Whatever was happening, it was more than just a kidnapping. It was an offense against everything they stood for. The girls' desperation ignited a fierce determination in their hearts. The sheriff, a grizzled man with a weathered face and eyes that had seen too much, arrived swiftly, his voice steady but grave. "We can't let this stand," he said. "They're not just taking a boy, they're threatening all of us. If we don't act now, they'll come back for the rest." In that moment, the legend of what the Cowboys would do was born. They mounted their horses with a sense of purpose that transcended mere duty. It became a moral imperative. The outlaws thought they had the upper hand, but what they didn't realize was that the Cowboys, those rugged, fearless men, had a code that would not be broken. They would chase these villains across the plains, through canyons and wild brush, until the boy was safe and justice was served. Time was of the essence. The wind whipped their coats as they set out, the dust swirling behind them like a trail of fire. The girl's cry echoed in their minds, a haunting reminder of what was at stake. Every second counted. They knew the outlaws were dangerous, ruthless, and perhaps even desperate, but they also knew that courage and grit could turn the tide. As they rode deeper into the wilderness, shadows of doubt and fear fought against their resolve. But the stories of their deeds, their bravery, began to take shape. What the Cowboys did that morning wasn't just about rescue. It was about standing against chaos, about protecting the innocent, about holding on to the very spirit of the frontier. They followed the faint trail of horses, their instincts sharper than ever. The girls' words kept echoing in their minds. "They took my brother." That simple, heartbreaking plea fueled their determination. They were no longer just men on horseback. They were legends in the making, the embodiment of resilience and justice. Night fell as they pressed on, the stars offering a cold, distant witness to their quest. The outlaws had made a mistake, underestimating the strength of the communities that refused to back down. In the shadows, the Cowboys prepared for the confrontation that would come at dawn, knowing that this story, this act of heroism, would be remembered long after the dust settled. Because in that moment, on that rugged frontier, what the Cowboys did became legend. Their courage, their sacrifice, their unwavering commitment to what was right. These were the stories that would be told around campfires for generations. The little girl's tears had sparked a fire that could not be extinguished, a fire that would burn bright in the hearts of all who believed in justice, in hope, and in the enduring spirit of the West. And as the first light of dawn broke across the plains, the chase was far from over. But one thing was certain. No matter what lay ahead, these brave men would face it head-on, because they knew what they were doing was more than just a rescue. It was a legend in the making. In the quiet darkness of that early morning, as the first light struggled to pierce the thick gray clouds, a small girl's trembling voice shattered the stillness. Tears streamed down her face as she sprinted across the dirt yard of the ranch, clutching a crumpled note that had just been handed to her. Her voice, raw and desperate, echoed across the empty plains. "They took my brother." Her words carried more than just fear. They carried a promise made long ago, a vow etched deep into her heart. That vow was born from loss, from grief so profound it had become part of her very soul. It was a promise made in the shadow of her father's death, a promise to protect what was fragile and sacred: her family, her home, her kin. Her brother, a boy no older than 10, was not just her sibling. He was her heart, her future, the last piece of her family's hope. And she had sworn, with every ounce of her young courage, that she would do whatever it took to keep him safe, to save him from harm, to keep him alive, no matter what the cost. That vow had become her moral compass. It was the unbreakable thread that pulled her through the chaos of that brutal morning. As her screams pierced the dawn, she felt the weight of it. Her promise to her father, who had fallen defending their land, to preserve the family's honor and ensure their legacy endured. Her brother's kidnapping was not just an act of violence. It was a threat against everything she held sacred. And she knew, beyond any doubt, that her duty was to see him restored, to make sure the promise she made in her father's shadow was fulfilled. Her connection to her brother was more than blood. It was a bond forged in grief, strengthened by love, and sealed with a vow that no outlaw, no matter how ruthless, could shatter. She had no weapon but her voice, her tears, and the unwavering belief that she would see her promise fulfilled. Her eyes burned with a fierce resolve, a determination rooted in the sacred duty she carried inside her. As she ran, her mind replayed her father's words, words spoken in quiet moments of reflection, words that now echoed in her heart. "Protect what's yours, no matter the cost. Never forget your promise." Those words had become her guiding light, a moral anchor that kept her grounded amid the storm of chaos. The vow was her shield, her reason for hope when all seemed lost. The outlaws had taken her brother because they underestimated the strength of her family's love, a love that refused to be broken. They thought fear and despair would undo her, but instead, they ignited a fire that burned brighter with every step. She was driven by the sacred memory of her father, by the promise she made in his name, to never let harm come to her family, to never let their legacy fade into darkness. In that moment, her love for her brother became a beacon, illuminating the path ahead. It was a call to arms, not just with horses and guns, but with the moral strength that had been passed down through generations. Her vow was more than words. It was a sacred oath that bound her to a higher purpose, to protect her family's honor, to keep her promise alive, no matter what dangers awaited. And so she ran, fueled by love and unbreakable faith. Her tears blurred her vision, but her resolve sharpened, every heartbeat an affirmation of her commitment. Her connection to her brother was the reason she dared to hope, the reason she refused to give in to despair. It was a moral debt, an unspoken promise to her father, to herself, and to the memory of those who had fallen before her. Because in her heart, she knew that what the Cowboys would do, what they fought for, was rooted in this very love. Their deeds, their courage, their sacrifice, all stemmed from a moral obligation to protect the innocent and uphold the sacred bonds that held their community together. The girl's cry that morning was the spark that ignited a legend, one born from love, loss, and an unyielding promise that would echo through history. With every step, she carried that vow forward, the promise to find her brother, to keep her family's legacy alive, and to honor her father's memory. That vow, forged in grief and sealed in love, was the true heart of this story. It was what made the Cowboys' legendary deeds not just acts of bravery, but sacred acts of love and devotion. Because at its core, every hero's journey is driven by the bonds they refuse to break, by the promises they swear to keep, come what may. The sun had long since dipped below the horizon, leaving the desert in a hush of shadows and fading light. The air was thick with silence, broken only by the faint whisper of the wind sliding through the empty, abandoned ranch house. Inside, The place was a relic of a bygone era. Faded photographs curled at the edges, old medals tarnished and gathering dust on a cracked shelf, and a battered leather chair that once knew comfort now sitting hollow and broken. This was where he came to escape, to drown the ghosts that haunted him. He sat alone in that worn chair, staring at a faded photograph clutched tightly in his trembling hands. It was a picture of a young boy and a girl, brother and sister, smiling in a field of wildflowers, their innocence captured in a moment frozen in time. But now the image felt distant, almost surreal. It was a reminder of what had been lost, what could never be reclaimed. His eyes flicked over the scars that marred his weathered face. Marks from fights, from regret, from battles fought in silence. Each one was a story, a reminder of past failures he couldn't undo. His gaze drifted to a dusty shelf where an old medal hung, tarnished and forgotten. It was a symbol of a different life, one of honor, of service, of promises kept. But that life felt like another world now, distant and unreachable. The medal, like many things in this lonely place, was a relic of a better time. Times when he believed in something greater, when the weight of guilt hadn't crushed his spirit. Now all that remained were memories and the echo of a past that refused to die. A small, frayed letter lay on the table beside him, its edges torn and stained with time. He had kept it hidden, afraid to face what it represented. Carefully, he unfolded it, revealing words written in a shaky hand. Words he'd read countless times but could never truly believe. It was from his brother, written during a time of hope, promising that they'd always be there for each other, no matter what. But the letter was also a silent testament to what had gone wrong, to the promises broken, to the innocence lost in a world that was cruel and unforgiving. He clenched his jaw, feeling the weight of guilt settle deep in his chest. How had he failed them? How had he let the darkness seep into their lives? The desert outside reflected his soul, arid, empty, and scarred. The cracked walls of the house echoed his fractured spirit. Every broken piece of furniture, every cracked window, was a mirror of his own shattered hope. A gust of wind rattled the loose shutters, and he instinctively pulled his coat tighter around him. His eyes drifted back to the photograph. Those smiling faces, so full of trust and love, now distant memories. His fingers traced the outline of the boy's face, feeling the roughness of age and the scars of regret. He wondered if his brother was alive, if he was safe, or if the darkness had swallowed him whole. The guilt gnawed at him, what he should have done, what he could have prevented. In that desolate room, surrounded by relics of a past that haunted him, he felt the weight of his humanity. He was a man broken by loss, haunted by mistakes, and burdened by guilt. Yet, beneath that weight, a flicker of resolve remained. Somewhere deep inside, a faint ember of hope still glowed. A hope that someday he might find redemption, that his sins could be forgiven, and that the love he failed to protect might still survive. He closed his eyes for a moment, imagining his brother's face, bright, full of life, and trusting. That image was his anchor, his reason to keep going despite the pain. The desert outside was silent now, but within him, a storm of emotion raged, regret, longing, and an unyielding desire for atonement. He knew that what he'd lost was more than just a family member. It was a piece of himself, an innocence, a trust, a hope that had been shattered long ago. But in that brokenness, he found a strange clarity. That redemption was a journey, one step at a time, and that even in the deepest darkness, there was a chance for light. As he finally stood and looked out into the vast, empty desert, he made a silent vow, one that echoed in the quiet of the night. He would carry his guilt, his loss, and his broken past. But he would also carry the memory of his brother, the love that no darkness could erase. Because in the end, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about holding on to what made him human, what kept the hope alive in a world that seemed to have forgotten it. And maybe, just maybe, someday, He could find peace in the ashes of his past and forge a new future, one built on the remnants of love and the unbroken promise to never give up. The night was heavy with anticipation as the hero reached for his battered, leather-bound phone, the screen flickering in the darkness. His fingers trembled with urgency, knowing that time was running out. He had no fancy equipment, no military arsenal, just a handful of trusted allies, each one a different piece of the moral fabric that held their fragile world together. He took a breath, then dialed the first number, his voice steady but filled with an unyielding resolve. "Loyalty first," he muttered to himself as the line connected. The first voice on the line was rough and gravelly, seasoned by years of fighting for what mattered. It was Charlie, a former soldier whose loyalty ran deep. "You called, brother?" Charlie's voice was calm but powerful, like a steady drumbeat that promised he would never turn away from those in need. His reputation was built on unwavering allegiance. He'd been through fire and back, and he'd do it again without hesitation. "Count on me. Wherever you need me, I'll be there." Next, he reached out to a different kind of ally, Jesse, a young biker whose face bore the scars of past battles, but whose eyes shone with unshakable courage. When the call connected, Jesse's voice came through with a fiery edge. "You know I don't back down from a fight. If it's injustice, I ride. I'll bring everything I've got, no questions asked." Jesse's loyalty was fierce, driven by a sense of justice that refused to let evil go unchecked. Then, there was Rosa, a wise woman who'd seen too much but carried her wisdom like armor. Her voice was gentle, yet every word was weighted with experience. "You've called me in the dark, and I see the light of hope in your voice. I'll come not just because I must, but because I believe in redemption. We all deserve a second chance, and I'll help you find it." Rosa's strength was rooted in her understanding that even broken souls could be saved, that justice required patience and insight. He paused, then pressed the button for the next number. A gruff, unshakable voice answered, "Henry," a hulking ex-outlaw turned protector of the weak. "You're asking for help, and I don't forget old debts," Henry said gruffly. "I've seen what injustice does. I'm in. We're all in, because nobody should suffer alone, especially not when we can stand together." Henry's loyalty was forged in the fires of regret and redemption, his presence a reminder that even those with a troubled past could fight for what's right. Finally, he dialed the last number, hesitating just a moment before pressing send. A voice that carried the weight of countless battles and hard-earned wisdom answered. Mara, a former outsider who'd fought her way into their circle, driven by a desire to make amends. "You know I don't do this for applause," Mara said softly but firmly. "I've made mistakes, but I've learned that true courage is standing up against injustice, even when it's personal. I'm with you, because this fight is ours, and I won't walk away." As each voice responded, a powerful sense of unity grew within him. Here were 5 different lives, 5 different values: loyalty, courage, wisdom, redemption, and unwavering resolve, coming together, bound by a common purpose. They weren't just allies. They were a family forged in the crucible of shared struggle. Their presence, each with their own scars and stories, built a tapestry of strength that made the hero believe in hope again. He looked out into the night, feeling the weight of their loyalty, courage, wisdom, redemption, and resilience. Together, they formed an unbreakable chain, each link vital, each one stronger because of the others. These allies weren't just fighting for justice. They were fighting for something deeper. The belief that no matter how broken the world seemed, unity and unwavering human values could still stand tall against injustice. As he ended the calls, a surge of renewed hope coursed through him. They were ready. Together, they would face whatever darkness awaited, fueled by loyalty that knew no bounds, courage that refused to yield, wisdom that guided their steps, and a shared conviction that even in the face of despair, the human spirit could prevail. They weren't just a team, they were a testament to what it meant to stand for what's right, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And with that, the night grew silent once more, but inside, a fire burned brighter than ever. A fire of unity, hope, and unbreakable human values. The first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a faint, golden glow across the endless plains. But for the rider on the battered horse, the morning brought no comfort, only a heavy weight pressing down on his chest. The landscape stretched out before him like a vast, open wound, raw and unforgiving. The journey had only just begun, yet every mile felt like a mile deeper into a storm he couldn't see but could feel in every fiber of his being. The wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying stories of hope, fear, and sacrifice, as if the very earth was mourning alongside him. He remembered the girl's tear-streaked face, her desperate cry that haunted his thoughts. "They took my brother!" That cry had become both a rallying call and a reminder of the price of keeping a promise. The road ahead twisted like a serpent, uncertain and treacherous. Storm clouds gathered on the distant horizon, dark and foreboding, threatening to swallow the faint light of dawn. The rider's heart pounded in rhythm with his horse's steady gait, each hoofbeat echoing like a drum of resolve. The landscape was both literal and symbolic, a reflection of the chaos and clarity inside him. The storm was a looming challenge, a symbol of the chaos that had taken the boy, the injustice that had shattered innocence, and the darkness threatening to engulf everything he held dear. Yet, amid the threatening clouds, the faint glow of hope persisted, fragile but unyielding. As he rode through the storm's edge, flashes of memory flickered, images of childhood innocence, of laughter shared around fires, of promises made under the open sky. He remembered her tiny hand clutching his, eyes wide with fear but also with trust. She believed in him not just as a protector but as a promise keeper. That memory fueled his determination, urging him forward even as the rain began to lash against his face, stinging like the doubts and fears he tried to suppress. The storm was relentless, just like the injustice they faced, and the journey felt both literal, through mud, wind, and chaos, and symbolic, through the very trials that tested his resolve and the strength of his vow. The highway stretched ahead, a long ribbon cutting through the wilderness, illuminated by sporadic flashes of lightning. It was a narrow path between worlds, the one of safety, of hope, and the one of chaos, of loss. Each mile was a step away from despair and closer to the confrontation that awaited him. His mind drifted to the girl's tearful face, her voice echoing in his mind, her innocent plea that now burned like a flame in his chest. He thought about the promise he made to her, to bring her brother back, no matter the cost. The promise was a heavy burden, but also a light, guiding him through the storm, through the night, through the darkness that threatened to swallow him whole. Night fell as he pressed on, the stars flickering faintly overhead like distant memories of better days. The darkness was thick, almost tangible, wrapping around him like a shroud. Every shadow seemed to whisper doubts. What if he couldn't succeed? What if the storm never ended? But then he remembered the faces of those who believed in him. His friends, his allies, the girl. Each one a beacon of hope amid the chaos. Their faith was his armor, their hope his fuel. With each passing hour, the landscape changed. Rising hills, dense forests, open fields bathed in moonlight. These physical obstacles mirrored the inner struggles, the fears, the uncertainty, the unwavering commitment to the promise he'd made. The journey was both an escape and a pursuit, a literal chase across the land, and a symbolic quest to restore what was lost, to reclaim innocence and stand against the darkness. At dawn, as the first rays of sunlight pierced through the remnants of the storm, he reached the outskirts of a small town. The storm had passed, but the storm within him still raged, fierce and unyielding. His muscles ached, his mind was weary, but his spirit burned brighter than ever. The landscape, once a symbol of chaos, now shimmered with the promise of hope, the promise he carried, etched into every mile, every storm, every memory, was the reason he rode. Because some promises are worth every storm, every sacrifice, every mile. He looked ahead, knowing that the journey's true test was only beginning. The landscape was still vast, still uncertain, but he had come too far to turn back. The legend was not born from easy roads or smooth sailing. It was forged in storms that tested everything: faith, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit. And as he pushed forward into the dawn, he understood that this journey was more than just a chase. It was a testament to what it truly meant to keep a promise. As the sun crested the horizon, casting a pale, tentative light over the small town, the riders approached with a quiet purpose that seemed to silence even the wind. Their horses moved in steady, deliberate formation, each one a shadow against the awakening sky, shadows that carried the weight of a promise made in darkness. The landscape around them was still and expectant, as if holding its breath in anticipation of what was to come. They had crossed storms, traversed countless miles, and fought through nights of doubt. But now they stood on the brink of a different kind of battle, one that would test their resolve in ways words could not capture. They arrived at the hospital first, a modest brick building nestled among weathered storefronts and quiet streets. The group dismounted silently, the horses shifting their weight with a calm that belied the storm of emotions swirling within. In that moment, the air seemed to thicken, an almost tangible tension that stretched between them like an unspoken vow. No words were needed. Their presence alone spoke volumes. The figures, each one marked by scars, grit, and purpose, formed a silent array of strength. They stood shoulder to shoulder, a wall of unwavering loyalty and resolve, silently declaring that they would protect what was innocent and fight what was unjust. Then, like a wave gathering force, they moved as one, their steps purposeful and measured. The group's silence was deafening, a collective heartbeat that matched the pounding of their own. It was as if the very ground beneath them recognized the gravity of their coming confrontation, an unspoken acknowledgement that this was no longer a journey of miles, but a crossing into a battlefield of moral stakes. Their eyes, sharp and unyielding, reflected a calm ferocity. Every face told a story, of sacrifice, of redemption, of standing tall against the darkness threatening to swallow their community whole. They approached the courthouse next, a weathered building with peeling paint and windows that looked out over the town like watchful eyes. The group's formation was deliberate, arrayed like a shield, an unmovable presence that commanded attention without a single word. The silence was heavy, almost sacred, as they drew nearer, their figures illuminated by the morning light that now spilled over the town like a blessing and an ultimatum. The courthouse doors stood open, yet none dared to step inside without first acknowledging the storm of justice that had arrived on the horizon. The power of their collective presence was undeniable, an unspoken challenge to the darkness that lurked beneath the surface of civility. With each step, they moved closer to the core of the conflict, an unyielding force that refused to be broken by fear or hesitation. The small town, seemingly quiet, seemed to pulse with energy, waiting for the inevitable clash. The group's silence was now a language of defiance, an armor forged from years of hardship and unwavering belief in what was right. They were a testament that sometimes the most powerful weapon was not a gun or a fist, but the quiet strength of unity and resolve. As they reached the town square, their figures cast long shadows on the cracked pavement, stretching outward like the roots of a mighty tree, deep, unbreakable, and rooted in justice. Every eye in the town was drawn to them, an unspoken recognition of what they represented. Hope standing firm against despair, courage confronting evil, resilience refusing to yield. Their presence was a silent storm, poised to erupt, but still holding back, waiting for the inevitable moment to strike. This transition from journey to battlefield was marked not by chaos, but by a mounting tension, an electric charge in the air that warned all who watched that the true fight was about to begin. The group's silence and formation had already begun to shape the scene, turning the quiet town into an arena of moral reckoning. Every breath, every heartbeat, seemed to echo the unspoken truth that sometimes the greatest battles are fought not with weapons, but with the unwavering strength of those who refuse to turn away from justice. In that moment, standing amid the quiet streets and looming shadows, they became more than a group of riders. They embodied the very spirit of legend. And as the silence stretched on, everyone knew that what was coming would mark their place in history, not just for what they would do, but for the unshakable force of who they had become. The room was heavy with silence, thick with unspoken truths and the unrelenting weight of moral conflict. The hero faced the figure of authority, the judge, a man whose calm exterior masked a mind adept at weaving deception and bending truths to his will. His eyes were cold, calculating, as he leaned forward slightly, a subtle smile playing on his lips that did not reach his eyes. This was not just a man presiding over a case. He was a master manipulator, wielding his authority like a weapon, threading lies into the fabric of justice itself. The hero knew the game well. He had watched the subtle shifts, the calculated pauses, and the way the judge's words slipped past the truth, cloaked in diplomatic language that disguised moral corruption. It was a mental duel, an intricate battle of ethics and wit, where the stakes were the soul of what was right. The hero's mind raced, not with anger or violence, but with clarity. He remembered the little girl's tear-streaked face, her voice trembling as she begged for her brother's return. That image fueled his resolve, but he knew he couldn't afford to be swayed by emotion alone. This was a test of intellect, of integrity. The judge leaned back, steepling his fingers, a practiced display of confidence. "You see," he said smoothly, "the law is complex. Sometimes what's right isn't always black and white. Perhaps what you see as injustice is, in fact, a matter of perspective." The words flowed effortlessly, cloaked in the language of morality, yet they masked an agenda, a desire to manipulate, to distort the truth to serve his own ends. The hero responded not with hostility but with calm precision. Justice isn't a matter of perspective. It's about truth and morality. When you manipulate facts or hide the reality to protect someone's reputation, you're not upholding justice. You're corrupting it. His voice was steady, unwavering, a mirror of his moral stance. He knew the judge's tactics. Innuendos, subtle insinuations, the diversion of attention from what truly mattered. The judge's eyes flickered, momentarily caught off guard by the clarity in the hero's words. But he quickly masked it, smiling again, this time more coldly. "It's easy to judge from the outside," he said. "But morality isn't always so clear-cut. Sometimes we must weigh the bigger picture, consider the community's needs over individual rights." The hero felt a surge of moral clarity. "The bigger picture," he echoed softly, "cannot justify sacrificing innocence or truth. You might believe you're protecting the community, but in reality you're protecting your own interests, your reputation, your power. That's moral corruption, and it's the real threat here." The words hung in the air, a challenge to the judge's authority, a call to recognize that justice must be rooted in integrity, not manipulation. They were locked in a silent battle of wills, each word chosen carefully, each sentence a calculated move in the chess game of morality. The hero knew that the judge's greatest weapon was not force, but the ability to distort meaning, to sway opinions, to blur lines between right and wrong. And he refused to be pulled into that trap. The room seemed to shrink under the weight of their confrontation, the walls echoing with the silence of moral integrity versus moral decay. The hero's mind stayed focused on the core of his purpose, protecting the innocent, standing firm against corruption, without crossing the line into vengeance or coercion. His eyes met the judge's, unwavering, challenging him to see beyond the facade of authority. "You can spin your words," he said quietly, "but the truth always finds a way. Justice isn't about the power to silence others. It's about the courage to stand by what's right, even when it's hard." That moment of tension stretched into eternity, a silent testament that this was more than a confrontation of words. It was a battle of conscience. The hero understood that real victory wasn't in forcing someone to bend to his will, but in holding firm to his principles, in exposing manipulation and moral rot for what it was. The judge's smirk faltered just slightly, an imperceptible crack in the veneer of control, and the hero knew that, in that fragile space, justice had already begun to take root. As the conversation drew to a close, neither side yielding but both knowing the fight was far from over, a quiet resolve settled in the hero's heart. The moral duel had been fought, not with fists or threats, but with integrity, wit, and unwavering conviction. And in that unspoken victory, he understood that true justice would prevail, not through force, but through the strength of truth and the courage to stand for what was right. In the dim light of the makeshift room, a battered tape recorder sat quietly on a worn table, its tape eager to reveal what had been hidden for too long. The hero's hands trembled slightly as he pressed the play button, knowing that what was about to be uncovered would forever change the course of justice and set the truth free. The crackling sound of static gave way to a voice, raw, trembling, yet undeniably real. It was the confession of a man who had once believed he was doing what was right, but who had, in truth, become a pawn in a web of moral corruption. The voice was shaky at first, but grew steadier as he began to speak, his words spilling out in a rush of remorse and revelation. "My name is Deputy Mark Sullivan," he started, voice thick with emotion. "I was there that day when everything changed. I saw what really happened, but I kept quiet because I was afraid. The judge, the one everyone trusts, he's the one who ordered it. He told me to cover it up, to make sure no one knew the truth." Pause, then the voice cracked. "They took the boy, that little boy, the girl's brother, because he saw too much. The judge, the sheriff, all of them, they used their authority to do something terrible. They manipulated the case, twisted facts, and cast blame on innocent people just to protect their own reputation. But I can't stay silent anymore. I have to tell the truth. It's the only way I can make amends." The recording continued, revealing how the boy had stumbled upon a clandestine meeting. A meeting where the judge and sheriff conspired to silence those who threatened to expose their corruption. Witnesses were coerced, evidence was planted, and the boy's voice had been silenced forever, or so they thought. But his words, recorded here, prove otherwise. "I hid the evidence," the voice admitted, voice trembling with guilt. "I kept the documents, the recordings, the proof that everything was a lie. I was scared, but I knew I couldn't carry this burden alone anymore." The girl's cry, her running to the ranch, those words, they haunted me. "They took my brother," she said, "and I knew then I had to do the right thing. I had to come forward." The hero listened in silence, eyes wide with shock and a rising sense of hope. Here was the truth that had been buried under layers of lies and intimidation. Proof that the villain's mask had slipped, revealing the moral rot underneath. The confession was a moral bombshell, exposing how those in power had manipulated justice, destroying innocent lives to protect their own secrets. The moral fabric of the story was torn apart by this revelation. The truth was clearer than ever. The little girl's cries, her desperate search for her brother, were not just moments of childhood fear. They were echoes of the real injustice perpetrated by those entrusted to uphold the law. The villain, hiding behind the guise of authority, had committed acts that would now be laid bare. The hero's heart swelled with a profound sense of validation and moral vindication. As the recording reached its conclusion, the voice offered a plea. "I want the world to know what really happened. The judge, the sheriff, they're not the heroes they pretend to be. They're the ones who took innocence, who tarnished the very idea of justice." Then, a quiet, trembling apology. "I'm sorry I couldn't do this sooner. I hope, somehow, it's not too late." The room fell silent. The weight of the truth hung in the air, a silent explosion of moral clarity and emotional release. The hero felt the surge of relief. Justice wasn't just about punishment. It was about uncovering the buried truths that set the innocent free. The confession had shattered the illusion of righteousness surrounding the villain, exposing him for what he truly was, a corrupt man who had used his authority to destroy lives. The little girl's tears, her frantic run to the ranch, finally found their meaning in this revelation. Her innocent cry had not been just an outburst of childhood fear. It was a rallying call for justice, a plea that could no longer be ignored. With this newfound evidence, the story would change forever. And as the hero looked at the recording, he knew that this was the moral release, the emotional explosion that had been long overdue. The truth was out, and with it came the hope that justice, in its purest form, would prevail. The villain's masks had fallen, and the moral landscape was forever altered, marked not by brute force, but by the unyielding power of truth, courage, and integrity. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the dusty ranch yard. The air was thick with anticipation, yet beneath the surface, a calm resolve held steady. The hero stood at the center, surrounded by the gathered crowd, family, friends, and those who believed in truth. He looked at the young girl, her small frame trembling, eyes swollen from tears. Her voice had broken when she ran to the ranch, crying out that her brother had been taken. But now her gaze held a fragile hope. The moment was heavy with unspoken truths finally coming to light. Justice was not about vengeance today. It was about revealing the truth that had lurked in darkness for too long. The villain, the man who wielded power behind a mask of authority, was about to be exposed, not with violence, but with dignity and moral clarity. The man was brought forward, his face pale, eyes darting nervously. The crowd's whispers faded into silence as the hero stepped forward, unwavering. He had promised to deliver truth, to uphold justice without crossing the line into hatred or revenge. Today, that promise was kept. With calm, deliberate words, he began to speak, revealing the evidence, the truth that had been hidden behind layers of manipulation and lies. He showed the documents, the recordings, the testimonies, all irrefutable proof that the man before them had committed moral crimes far worse than the theft of a child. The villain's facade crumbled as the truth was laid bare. His voice faltered, no longer confident, as he realized the weight of his actions was about to be judged openly. No more hiding behind the badge or the authority he once claimed. Now, he faced the community's collective moral judgment, a public reckoning that left no room for denial. The hero's tone remained respectful, human, firm but fair, knowing that justice's strength lay in integrity, not in hatred. "You used your power to silence the innocent," the hero said clearly, his voice steady but compassionate. "You manipulated the truth, twisted justice, and tried to hide your wrongdoings. But truth has a way of coming to light. And today, it's here, unfiltered and undeniable." His words echoed across the gathered crowd, resonating with the weight of moral clarity. The villain's shoulders slumped as the realization sank in. His reputation, his authority, all built on lies, was now exposed for what it truly was, a moral failure. As the truth unfolded, the crowd's reactions ranged from shock to sorrow, but the hero's focus remained on dignity. Revenge would have been easy, an eye for an eye, but that was never the path he chose. Instead, he upheld the principle that justice must be rooted in honesty and respect for human dignity. The little girl, clutching her torn dress, looked at the man who had caused her so much pain, and in her eyes, the hero saw a flicker of relief. Her cry had been heard, her pain acknowledged, and her brother's innocence vindicated. The villain was taken away, not with harsh words or violence, but with the respect owed to a person who had fallen from grace. The community's moral fabric was restored, not through revenge, but through truth and integrity. The hero's promise was fulfilled. Justice arrived, not as a destructive force, but as a moral release that reaffirmed the values they all shared. In the quiet that followed, the hero gently looked at the girl, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Your brother is safe now," he said softly. "The truth has come out, and Justice will see that he's returned to where he belongs, surrounded by those who love him. Her small face lit up with a mixture of relief and hope, a testament to the power of truth to heal wounds and restore faith. This was the moment where the moral arc closed, an affirmation that justice is not about revenge, but about moral clarity, dignity, and respect for human life. The villain had fallen not because of violence, but because of the strength of truth. The hero, maintaining his integrity, kept his word, proving that true justice honors morality over vengeance. And as the community moved forward, they carried with them a lesson written deep in their hearts, that justice, when rooted in truth and compassion, can heal even the deepest wounds and turn villains into lessons, not enemies. The legend of what was done here would be told for generations, not for violence, but for the moral victory that defined a true hero. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a warm, amber glow across the open plains. The air was thick with a sense of quiet resolution, the kind that settles after a storm, calm but alive with the promise of new beginnings. The hero, his shoulders bowed but his heart steady, turned away from the gathered crowd, his footsteps light as he moved toward the fading trail. His promise had been kept. The truth had been revealed, justice had spoken, and the villain's mask had fallen. Now he was leaving behind the scene of a moral victory, not with arrogance or triumph, but with a humble sense of duty fulfilled. His figure, silhouetted against the setting sun, became a fading shadow in the vast, open landscape, an enduring symbol of quiet strength and unwavering integrity. Behind him, the ranch stood silent, a testament to resilience, the land that had borne witness to pain and hope alike. The little girl, clutching her brother's hand, looked up at the vast sky now turning a deep indigo. Her eyes shimmered with a mixture of relief and newfound hope, a silent acknowledgement that her world was beginning to heal. The boy, once lost in the shadows of fear, now stepped forward with a quiet confidence, ready to embrace the future. Their innocence, once overshadowed by darkness, was now reborn amidst the promise of renewal. The brotherhood of cowboys, the brave souls who stood united, gathered quietly at the edge of the yard. Their faces bore the marks of their journey, resolute, compassionate, and ready to move on. They shared silent glances, an unspoken vow that their fight was not just for justice today, but for the hope of a better tomorrow. They had become legends, not for violence or revenge, but for standing firm in their moral convictions, for protecting the vulnerable, and for refusing to let darkness define their legacy. As the stars began to emerge, tiny pinpoints of light in the vast velvet sky, a gentle breeze stirred the grass, whispering of new beginnings. The scene seemed to pause in a sacred moment of reflection, a quiet testament to the power of hope after pain, of renewal after loss. A single figure, the hero, disappeared into the distance, his silhouette merging with the open road that stretched endlessly ahead, an invitation to journey forward, uncharted and full of promise. The road was a symbol of endless possibilities, of hope unfurling beyond the horizon. It was a reminder that even after the darkest night, the dawn awaits, and with it, the chance to start anew. The girl, holding her brother close, looked up at the star-studded sky, her small face glowing with quiet determination. She knew her life would never be the same, but she also knew she was no longer alone. They had faced the shadows together, and now they would walk into the light, step by cautious step, guided by the hope that tomorrow would be brighter. The landscape stretched out before them, an endless canvas of open sky, rolling plains, and distant mountains, symbolizing the boundless potential of a new beginning. The stars shimmered, silent witnesses to the promise that no darkness could last forever, that every night gives way to dawn, and every ending is but the start of something new. As the hero's figure faded into the distance, the scene lingered on the horizon, a quiet reminder that hope persists even after the pain. The land, the sky, the stars, all stood as symbols of renewal, whispering that life always finds a way to heal, to grow, and to forge ahead. And in that silent, sacred space, hope blossomed quietly, an eternal promise that no matter how dark the night, the dawn will always come.